won his primary in August, and he is talking about his campaign for Boone County Recorder of Deeds. Thanks for being here, Bob. Oh, please tell us a little about yourself. I forgot that part.
Well, thank you all. Appreciate your time today, especially as you're making those important decisions on contributions. I very much appreciate that. You all know just as well as everybody that it takes money to run campaigns, and that support is really appreciated, especially at the county level, where it's not as interesting as some of our other campaigns at the state house level. So as Alice said, I am Bob Nolte. I'm running for Boone County Recorder of Deeds. Won the primary in August, and now will be your Democratic nominee for the November general election. Before I get going, I just want to see, are there any questions, given that we're getting a late start, things that you guys came prepared with that you want me to answer? Before I go in, I can talk to some of my background. I see that Sue, you got a question if you want to unmute.
Just a quick one.
Yeah.
I would have, and we know a little more about your background than some, but my question is, how strong is your opponent? How much, do you know how much money they've raised compared to you? That's a concern that I have.
Okay, and that was something I would get into, but let's talk about my opponent first. So my opponent is Shaman Jones. She works for FedEx Kinko's here in Columbia, mainly remote. So I think she's technically out of the downtown office, but mainly remote. So not many people have had a lot of contact with her. Things that I do know, so in terms of her last fundraising report, she had a kickoff, raised about $1,500 at her kickoff. Some of her contributors, Chuck Basie, Shri Tolston Reich, the normal Republicans that are going to come together and support their Republican candidates. She has said publicly she was asked to run on the last day of filing. So it was, they were looking to put a name on the ballot. Her big thing that she wants to do in the office, the thing that she's really passionate about is genealogical research. And while that is something that you can do in the office, it can be helpful. Someone I know that talked to me about genealogical research, not something I'm very into. They said you probably have a better chance on ancestry.com than any of the records in the recorder's office. But that is her big thing. It's not something, I mean, it's something I want to help people with if that's how they're using the office. But there's a lot more to what the recorder's office does. We need to make sure that it's professionally managed. All of our processes are up to date. We're being as efficient as possible with taxpayer dollars. So while I think we can be respectful to people that are wanting to use the office for that purpose, that's not really the main purpose of the office. So really the main purpose of the office is keeping track of who owns what parts of the county and how we can then assess those and tax those to begin the process of collecting tax revenue, which is how we run the county. Keeping clear and distinct records, making sure we have a really good handle on who legally owns what pieces, where those bills need to be sent, working hand in hand with our assessor. So anytime that something gets recorded in the recorder's office, we're immediately then transmitting that on to our assessor, so he can have that information as he's coming up with his land assessments, again, starting that process of taxation. So then we have money for our county commissioners to allocate for our county budget, county operations. Do we have any other questions before I can go back to some of my background? Awesome. All right. So my background, I grew up in upstate New York, Schenectady, New York. It used to be the headquarters of General Electric, an American locomotive company. It was kind of the start of the Rust Belt once those big companies pulled out. Went to high school there, was a student athlete. I was a diver in high school, but also did a lot of other things. Played trumpet in band, did theater production, so kind of all over the place, lots of different interests. When I went to college, I went to SUNY Binghamton, or Binghamton University as they'd much rather be known, state school in New York. Unlike Missouri, New York does not have a flagship campus at the moment. They identify 4 of their top universities, all in that top tier. So it was one of the university centers. I call it the Mizzou of New York. It isn't, it's just one of their top 4 universities. While I was there, I studied history. My thesis was, I researched the New York Manumission Society, which was post-Civil War, a group of leaders in New York that were fighting to not just remove people from slavery, but from indentured servitude, any other type of new type of slavery that could be come up with. They wanted to fight any perniciousness there. I continued to be a student athlete. So I tell people Binghamton is Division I, but it is the lowest level of Division I. Our basketball team made the NCAA tournament one time. It was a really big deal. But I was a springboard diver. I chose Binghamton because it did not have the high dive. We only had a 1 meter and a 3 meter springboard. I didn't really want to get into that scary part of diving. Competed for 4 years. Wasn't great, but was able to contribute to my team. Where I really felt like I contributed and found some of my passion was getting involved in what they call SAC, Student Athlete Advisory Committee. It's essentially student government for student athletes. So every team at every university has representatives to the school's group, and it works its way up. So eventually, after 2 years at Binghamton, I became the president of the Binghamton chapter, and then represented Binghamton to my conference, which was the America East Conference. So got to travel, go to 2 meetings a year for that. The real reason that the NCAA has these groups, it's for student athletes to give feedback on proposed legislation. So if the NCAA wants to change a rule about how much money they can give you when you're on the road, on a travel day, they can give you $25 instead of $20 for meals. They want the student athletes' feedback in that process. I then was nominated and selected for the national level of this group. So I was one of 32 student athletes that sat on an NCAA committee, was able to influence legislation directly as an undergraduate student, which is not something that most student athletes have any idea happens, but really not something that most people have an idea. So through that experience, I got really involved in how are these policies made? How do the rules work? Why is this the way it is? I sat on the financial aid committee for the NCAA, so got to see how they work through trying to change some financial aid rules and thinking of, well, this is going to be great for baseball players, but is it going to be great for softball players as well? So that was some of my early experience in legislation. When it was time to finish up undergraduate work, I decided to pursue working in college athletics. I went to the University of Southern California for my graduate degree. It was between there, Georgia, and Kansas. So I think I made the right decision, number one, weather-wise, but especially for my education. So spent 2 years in Los Angeles, worked in the compliance office. I also worked as a mentor to student athletes. So not tutoring a subject, but helping them with time management, keeping on top of their schoolwork. In that role, learned a whole lot about compliance and decided that early experience in legislation is really what I wanted to work in, how I wanted to continue my work. So came to Mizzou in 2012. It was my first job. Moved out here just before we entered the SEC and spent just about 10 years in the compliance office. I started as what they called the compliance coordinator. It was essentially an administrative position, a lot of filing, a lot of working with the boss of the office on her calendar, on her schedule. Learned a whole lot from some great leaders. Mike Alden, who was our athletic director for years, really taught me some great life lessons early on about having attention to detail and making sure we're putting out good work at all times. We have to be proud of what we're putting out into the world. So through that role, we had also some ups and downs. We had some NCAA infractions cases, so got to see the back end of how those infractions work once we do break rules, how we apply those punishments and track that. When I got to Mizzou, everything that the compliance office did was paper-based. So student athletes would fill out their beginning of the year forms. They'd have a booklet. It was 25 pages thick of all this information that they had to give us every year. And then we had someone come in and type all of that into an Excel spreadsheet so we could use it. I thought that was probably not the most efficient way to do that. So we went out and found a technology provider that would help us with that process, help us update our technology use to make it more streamlined, to make us more efficient. So our first system we implemented was in 2014, I believe. Got all of our student athletes on it, got all of our coaches. It helped them in their recruiting process, being able to track the times they call student athletes, track the number of hours they practice. That's a big one. We limit how much student athletes can practice to protect them, and not having to do that on a paper calendar every week really increase some of our efficiencies. Over the years, I got promoted, so became assistant director, associate director, most recently was director of compliance. So moved up through those levels with increased responsibility each time. Took on education as one of my roles, so making sure that the people that are supposed to know what those rules were receiving that education. So whether that's putting out written documents, giving presentations, going and visiting high schools to talk to those high school prospects about what it takes to meet the academic requirements of the NCAA, that became my responsibility. That's something that I think will be helpful in the recorder's office. So similar to our clerk, Brianna Lennon, she does a great job getting out into the community, letting people know about voting issues, getting people registered. There are less pressing issues in the recorder's office for people, but we need to make sure they understand what they can and can't do in the office, how we can help, how we can be of service to them. Outside of the university, got involved in the community, was looking for different ways that I could give back. So I I was appointed by the city council to the City of Columbia New Century Fund. It's a nonprofit that the city uses for grant making purposes. They used to provide funds for influenza vaccines. They maintain the Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial. So basically got a really good background on some of the city services that are provided, became the treasurer of that group. So got to see how we are actually spending that money, where the money comes in, goes out, and being good stewards of those resources. Also spent some time umpiring Little League, different way for me to give back. Became a AARP tax aid helper, which is someone that helps low income and elderly folks with their taxes. Again, just looking for ways to give back. This was before I started getting involved in politics. Once I started that kind of became my next way to give back. So worked on different campaigns, started making phone calls with Jason Kander back when he was running for Senate. And through that, met more local candidates, got to know Martha Stevens, Michaela Skelton, Hallie Thompson when she ran for Congress. More recently, Nick Foster, our 4th Ward City Councilman, was able to help him out in his campaign. So really got to know the community, got to know the people there, and saw, this opportunity, once I found out about it, as a way for me to really give back, for me to join our great county government, to be able to continue that tradition that we have of having really good democratic elected officials professionally managing those departments. Hearing some of the history of the departments, you can see we've had long-serving elected officials that have been known nationally, that have been able to give back to Boone County, but also outside of Boone County. And that's something that really interests me. That's really where I think that my skills are best utilized. It's coming into a position, doing it really well, becoming that subject matter expert. This is just a new subject matter for me to really sink my teeth into. I've already started doing that, working with our former recorder, Betty Johnson. She helped me make the connections between here's what you know, here's what I know from the NCAA, here's your rule book. This is the same thing we're doing here in the recorder's office. This is our rule book. These are the same processes. We need to, document effectively. We need to make sure there's a high attention to detail paid to all of these things, but really want to make sure that the people of Boone County are being served as best as possible. So I'm going to take a drink. Does anyone have questions on any of that before I talk a little bit more about some more campaign specifics? David, you can go ahead and unmute.
Mute myself there. I liked when you got to the part about your political work because I think I was directing the Boone County Democratic office at the time, and I did notice, couldn't help but notice how welcome and how active you and your wife were in all of that. So I guess I'm wondering, does the Recorder of Deeds office kind of take you out of politics? I know we're very careful about making sure Brianna, for example, who's a great political person too, is not dependent on for politics because she needs to serve all the people of Boone County. Do you have any thoughts on how you can manage to, I guess, help us in the causes you love and still appeal to this sense of fairness to everybody in this important office?
Yeah, and I think Brianna is a great example. And my understanding with her not being involved in some of these political aspects is more of the fact that she's the one running those elections.
Of course.
She has to be impartial because she has to adjudicate, and she has to be, and I could also defer to CJ if he has any thoughts on that. I still plan, if elected, to be involved in the county party. I'd like to see our county officials be involved. Obviously, I will still serve everyone equally. I will still serve the people of Boone County, regardless of their party, whether they vote for me. They deserve to have great customer service when they come in the office. They deserve to have someone that's working to help them solve their issue. But I do plan to still be involved. I think we have a good opportunity with this cycle to then start planning for 2024 with Boone County having its own Senate seat. There's going to be some really big work to be done countywide, and I think with great elected officials, we can help influence that. Carl and Mari?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask about, first of all, again, to commend you on how active you've been and what a wonderful campaign you've put on during the primaries and now the general. But my question has to do with that. I believe one of your primary opponents is a person who works in the office, and that can raise some interesting dynamics sometimes. So would you want to address how you would plan to handle that when elected?
Yep. So one of my opponents was Shannon Martin. She is one of the deputies in the office. We spoke briefly after the election. We have plans to get together. I said it during the campaign a lot. I really want to work with them. I want to be part of their team. I want to contribute to what that office has going right now. I'm not coming in to try and change things very quickly. I want to make sure we take our time when evaluating how that office has been functioning, bringing my own opinions on how maybe things can be done better. But I'm really excited to continue to work with them. I hope that everyone in that office stays. I haven't heard otherwise, but I really do. I hope that they'll continue to work there. I saw Pam, did you still have something?
Yes, I do. Would you refresh our memory of all of the different kinds of records that this office does?
So the largest portion of the office, it's land transactions. So deeds of trust, mortgage records. They also will record U.S. military discharge if the person wants that to be recorded there, kind of as a backup for if they were to lose that. The one that kind of sticks out outside of that area is marriage licenses. So they also issue all of the marriage licenses in the county. Alice, and then we'll go to Al.
Bob, you mentioned all the campaigns you've helped on over the years. I also want to mention you helped me put up Biden signs in the heat. And we had to put them up twice, right? Because they would disappear. But while you're running your campaign right now, I understand you're also reaching out to some of the other county people who are running for office with some of your knowledge. And I want to thank you for that. And maybe you'll talk a little bit about that role. I mean, we as Democrats and out of the office are trying to work, but we mostly work with individual campaigns that we've decided to work on. So you might talk a little about that. I know you've worked with Jenna some.
Well, that's one I've always been very happy to help share knowledge. Not a whole lot of people have had a lot of experience working in the van. We need more people to learn that. So anyone that I can teach how to use van makes my life a little easier. There's only, between Sarah and Emily and a couple other people in the county, there's not very many people that can manage that effectively. So I'm always happy to meet with candidates, help them out as much as possible. I think that, whatever I've been able to learn, someone else has taught me. So passing that along to others is real important. Al?
Yeah, I was just wondering, why would you trade a career, upwardly mobile career in intercollegiate athletics for an important but relatively obscure county office?
And I'll be completely honest, I get this on the doors a lot. The number one thing, so the way that people move up in intercollegiate athletics is by moving around. So I hit essentially what was my ceiling at Mizzou without having to move somewhere else. And looking in Missouri, we are the only FBS top level football playing school in the state. So I would have to leave the state. And honestly, I really like it here. My wife, her family lives in Cowley County. We bought our house here just before the pandemic. I want to stay here. And that was really part of what we were looking at of what is the thing that I can do to contribute to this great area? How can we make it better, make it more of a destination? Talking with Kip about what his vision is for the county. I'm really excited with Kip and Justin and Janet to be able to have a county commission that's really going to push us into that next level. So being a part of that really sold me on it. And again, just having an opportunity to pivot into something where I know I can do this, I can become that subject matter expert and really dive into something new was intriguing for me. Any other questions? All right, so I'm just going to go through my notes, see what else I had. Couple things I wanted to clear up. So endorsement wise, we have some new endorsements wanted to talk about. So met with the laborers local 955 last week. They have endorsed my campaign. I think that's important. They represent some county workers, but overall to have elected officials that support our pro-labor, support our union folks, and making sure that all of us are doing our part to support them. Also received endorsements from Justin Aldred and Janet Thompson, county commissioners. Really appreciate them and having conversations about how they can see this office fitting into overall county government organization, and excited to work with them if elected. Was endorsed by Kenny Moore, who was our assessor. Spent some time with him learning how the process, once it leaves the recorder's office, what happens. Was amazed to find out that they still have one person. Anytime we get a new plat, something comes from the city council or the county commission, we get a new platted piece of land. That is then hand drawn into a computer by one person in their office that sits there and puts those in every day. So that was more for me as a nerd. Being able to see how that worked was really cool. But having Kenny's endorsement as probably the person, elected official I'll work closest with is important. And then finally, Nora Dietzel, our outgoing recorder of deeds, has endorsed the campaign. And she sees the work I put in the primary, the learning that I did of here, knowing that I'm not the one with the expertise, but coming in, being able to show that I will learn whatever those things that I need to pick up on quickly, be able to provide great leadership, build that team back to where we think it should be. So long term, so we're looking at digitizing old records. I think I mentioned this last time I was here, if not in other settings. So the office right now works through digitizing older records. Every day they get chunks and chunks of that done. We'll continue to do that for the time being, but do want to evaluate some other technology options, whether it's our system we use for the overall office support, or if there is a need to outsource some of that scanning to get those digital records up to date. Going in there myself, having seen what we're looking at, it is old, handwritten on torn pages. They're not all in order. So it can be a really big task. It's daunting, but it is something that we want to make sure we're getting that up to date so people have secure access from their homes to see the information that they want. I was looking back at my property and you hit kind of a dead end of this is as far back online that I can track it. And that's when you have to go into the office. So making sure we can get as much online as possible. Other things that people have pointed out during the campaign. So looking at updating how high quality the scans are. We had someone reach out that it's just hard to read some of those scanned documents. So we'll look into that. Optical character recognition. So that is when something is scanned, it picks up on all the words that are there. So those can be searched. Not sure if that's useful in every scenario, but someone that is searching for specific things in deeds asked about that. So we'll look and see if that is something that might be updated. Again, we work with county citizens. A lot of the times when the office is interacting with citizens, it's issuing the marriage license, or if there's an issue with a deed, they're coming in to do research, or they're coming in to sort out something. Usually if there's an estate issue, that's most of the time we're dealing with those groups. Also deal with other government offices. So work closely with the city and the county to record any new plats, making sure we're keeping that information up to date. And then there's other business interests that work with the recorder's office, such as the mortgage lenders, the title companies. So building those relationships, making sure they're getting effective customer service and able to do what they need to do because they're an important part of that process. We talked about Shimon. So the last thing I'll just point out, we talked a little bit about the primary. From my previous experience working on other campaigns, we know that knocking doors is the most effective way that we can make contact with voters. My campaign knocked over 5,400 doors. I did over 3,000 myself. That was a great way to spend the summer, a very hot way to spend this summer. But that's the best part of the job, is getting out and being able to talk to folks and really get to understand, number one, tell them what the recorder's office does. And number two, understand how they interact with it. You'd be surprised with the different ways that people have had to come in to deal with the recorder's office on a bunch of different areas. So for the general, we're going to continue to do that. We're going to make sure we're getting out. We're going to talk to some more persuadable voters. So in the primary, we focused just on regular primary voters. We knew that the numbers were there, that people that are going to come out in the primary, if we can talk to them about me, that should be enough. The general, we want to increase that. Similar to what Alice said, as I'm out, I want to make sure I'm also talking up our other county candidates. Being very far down the ballot, it's important that we tell people, hey, you got to get down and vote for Kip. You got to get down and vote for Jenna. We're important too. We have races. We need to make sure we keep these seats in Democratic hands. David, you got a question?
Yes, thank you, Bob. When you and I were volunteering at Speaker Circle a few months ago, you gave me a great rundown of the interplay between the treasurer's office and the assessor's office and the recorder's office. Unfortunately, I'm one of those people who have to hear something several times, and maybe for the benefit of some of the others here, would you go over that again? Just how these different officers work together?
Right. So as it was told to me, the recorder's office kind of starts our entire essentially taxation, but the entire way we fund county government. So when someone buys a piece of property, I buy my house, that is recorded in the recorder's office. That then gets passed along to the assessor. The assessor now says, Bob owns this piece of property. He's going to be the one responsible for that tax bill. I'm going to assess it at this value. He then takes that. Technically, it goes to the clerk for a little bit, but it then moves on to our collector. The collector is responsible for making sure that those bills go out. So that bill will come to me for the property that I own. I will then pay that. That'll get passed along to the treasurer, who then has those funds for our county commission to allocate on whatever it is we need to spend it on, roads and bridges, any other county services that are provided. Sue and Herb.
Yes, I know and appreciate that from the beginning you have recognized one of the key problems of running for an office such as yours. It's down ballot. And a disturbing number of otherwise good people who show up to vote and vote for the top do not make it to the bottom. I know you've been attentive to this along the way, but are you doing in the last 6-7 weeks of this campaign anything different to, one, help broadcast even more the word that deeds are important, and two, enhance your name recognition that people might scan that area and say, oh, I know him.
I mean, nothing groundbreaking. We'll be getting our yard signs back out. So we pulled those all back in. We didn't want, fatigue. So all of our yard signs will go back out. We're hopefully doing that in kind of one big push. So they just kind of appear. In terms of down ballot, when we're talking to voters, it's pushing that. It's making sure that they know if they've committed to vote for me, we got to make sure they know, well, yeah, I'm going to be pretty far down. I'm the only Bob on the ballot. So look for Bob, but you want to hit all of those other races in between. I'd love for you to vote Democrat in all of those races, being able to talk to them about those different issues, and then also encouraging them specifically on the initiative petitions. It's going to be a big thing for some of our voters. They're probably only going to come out. There will be a certain subset of voters that will only come out to vote on the adult use marijuana. We want to make sure that they're also then at least knowledgeable about what some of our other candidates, why these positions are important, why we want professional management of these county offices. David Robinson.
I'm probably telling a tale that others will remember, but Nora Dietzel won our award in 2015, maybe 2016, for as recorder of deeds, sacrificing her vacation to issue the first same-sex marriage licenses. About a year later, my own son got her signature on his marriage to another man. So that was a great heroic thing that Nora, in her great, good-natured and very serious way, got a lot of attention for. I'll just say that if you can computerize and do all the nerdy things that you say you're doing, you should be entitled to such an award as well. even if it's not quite so amazing. But who knows? We never know about marriages these days, do we? It's still a thought problem.
That was something that I was able to speak to on doors. So when my wife and I were talking about running for office, one of the positives of the recorder's office was it's apolitical. You're there to do a job, you're recording the deeds, you're following the law. But once we had the leaked memo, once we knew that Dobbs would be adjudicated and they are likely coming after Obergefell, it really changed how we have to address that. And that is something that I am very near and dear to me. My youngest brother, I think he should be able to marry his boyfriend. I don't think that should be something the state should be deciding. I think as we saw with the Dobbs decision, there's a lot of confusion right after. So making sure we have someone that's going to prioritize continuing to issue those licenses while they can, working with state leaders, local leaders, to find ways to make sure we can still do that. Really important to me. And hopefully we don't get to that point. Hopefully they see that this is not tenable. There was a law professor that wrote an article about how it might be more difficult to remove that because you're removing a right that is already granted by the government. I'm not a lawyer. I play one, but so I'm hopeful that we don't have that issue, but hopefully we're not going to have to deal with that, but it is something that is definitely on our radar. All right. Any other questions? So last thing I have is just things, what I need, what we need from the Muleskinners. The number one is talking to your friends, making sure they're going all the way down the ballot. We need to make sure that everyone is aware that these smaller races, they don't seem consequential, but we really want to make sure we get every seat. We want to make sure we show that Boone County is solidly Democratic, especially as we look at 2024 with our state Senate race. Other things do ask for donations. So if you are willing to donate, obviously I appreciate Muleskinners, but if any individuals can donate, that goes to contacting voters, making sure we can get out, put out some mail, put out other information to voters. We'll plug our Democrats Day of Action tomorrow. If you're able to make it at headquarters at 10, the State House Campaign Committee is putting that on, so it's more based on our House members, but it's going to be still really important for everybody to help out with those. Pam, question?
Just a statement. I'm pretty sure that the mailing that we're going to be doing, Vicki Hobbs is writing it, and 2 years ago it said
This is what
vote down the ballot. So I'm pretty sure it's going to say the same thing.
Yep.
Right. This is a copy of it that we did 2 years ago and shows a ballot box and lists every single candidate, every single Democrat. And that went out to a huge amount of voters, Democrats, possibly independents. Vicki will figure all that out. She's great at it. And then a number of us, Mari Scala worked on it too, nightly for that week, mailed them out in batches to different zip codes. So we think that helped elect Justin, and hopefully it's going to elect a whole slew of you and Adrian and Doug and Jenna. So anyway, it's really excited to be doing it again.
Yep, and we very much appreciate your support of the county party in getting that done as well. Any other questions?
I don't have a question, but I would just say, I'm so glad you're running. And two things. One, from hearing you talk about your college days, it wasn't political, but it was getting interested in politics.
I would have
Partisan politics, but
right.
it's definitely political.
I would have never been able to put my finger on that back then, but it's absolutely in hindsight. Oh yes, this is how this actually gets done.
Yeah,
Pardon?
and I appreciate the fact that you're trying to carry others with you. We're just thrilled that you're one of the young people that is trying to help carry our party. We appreciate that.
Pardon?
Let me just add that we are really looking forward to your election, and you're diving into the job with enthusiasm.
And I don't think
Good
we've
job.
said it. You're welcome to put a yard sign up for us.
Thank you, thank you.
All right, Bob, thank you so much for being here with us today. We appreciate it. Good luck on your campaign collection and election. And, everyone, as Bob has mentioned, as Pam mentioned earlier, tomorrow is the Democratic day of action. I want to say day of caring. That's United Way. So tomorrow, try to be at the office at 10. If you're up to it, I understand after we heard from all of our candidates and cheered them on, then some of us will be going out doing some door knocking for them. So if you're up to that, please come prepared, wear good tennis shoes. But we'll look forward to seeing you all then. Alice, you have a point?
I want to add, I'm just going to go there and write postcards and take home some stacks. I was going to get a stack for Mari. Any of you here, hide your heads. Don't yet have your stack. You can get one for Adrian and also a Get Out the Vote one that the local Democratic Party is putting out. Again, there's been research that says handwritten cards in small elections, and we are a small community, really can make an impact. So please get your cards. You've got a few weeks to fill them out. And I'm going to do some at the office and socialize with my
Good.
mask on.
So there's something, if you're not up to walking around door knocking, you can just join others at the party at the office tomorrow and sit around and help fill out some postcards or take some postcards home with you, either way. So all sorts of things we can do to get involved, to help our candidates out. Next week, our speaker, I think, is Kip Kendrick, right? So come on back next Friday. With that, I'm going to step away. The meeting's over and I need to head on over to my shift at the office. So I hopefully see a bunch of y'all tomorrow. And thanks a lot for everyone showing up. My apologies for being here late myself. We went to that senior thing at the mall and got away just barely in time. So anyway, my apologies. And I'll see y'all next week, and if not tomorrow.
Thank you all. Appreciate your time.
Thanks,
Thank
Bob.
you.
Thanks, everyone. Be well.